I inherited more than just land when Grandpa Joe passed away last spring. Along with the 100-acre farm came a small wooden box filled with seeds, ancient corn varieties he'd saved for decades. Everyone called them worthless heirloom seeds, but something about them felt sacred to me. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and condolences, but I remember standing in his old barn afterward, holding those seeds in my palm. They were smaller than modern corn kernels, with colors ranging from deep purple to golden yellow. Each variety had a handwritten label in Grandpa's careful script. Cherokee White Eagle, Painted Mountain, Glass Gem. My Uncle Frank shook his head when he saw me examining them. "Those old varieties don't yield worth a damn, son. Plant some good hybrid corn if you want to make money." But money wasn't what drew me to those seeds. Growing up, I'd spent countless summers working alongside Grandpa Joe, learning his old-fashioned ways. He never used GPS or fancy equipment, just his hands, his eyes, and an intuition that seemed to come from the earth itself. The farm had been in our family for 4 generations, but I was the only grandchild who'd shown any interest in continuing the tradition. My cousins had moved to cities, pursuing careers that didn't involve dirt under their fingernails. As I stood there in the fading afternoon light, dust motes dancing around me like tiny spirits, I made a decision that would change everything. I would plant Grandpa's seeds, not because it made financial sense, but because it felt like the right way to honor his memory. The box also contained a leather journal filled with his notes about planting patterns, moon phases, and weather observations spanning 50 years. I tucked it under my arm, knowing I had a lot to learn. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came the pressure to make decisions about planting. The neighboring farmers were already preparing their fields for hybrid corn and soybeans, crops that promised reliable yields and steady profits. But every time I looked at Grandpa's seed collection, I felt pulled in a different direction. My wife, Sarah, was supportive but worried. "We need this farm to work financially," she reminded me gently one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the fields gold. "We can't afford to experiment with the whole harvest." She was right, of course. We had a mortgage, 2 young kids, and dreams of making the farm sustainable for the next generation. But something deep inside me insisted that planting those heirloom seeds was more than just sentiment. It was necessary. I compromised by dedicating 20 acres to Grandpa's varieties, while planting the remaining 80 acres with conventional crops. It seemed like a reasonable balance between honoring the past and securing our future. The night before planting, I sat in Grandpa's old rocking chair on the porch, reading through his journal by lamplight. His handwriting was cramped but legible, filled with observations about soil conditions, weather patterns, and something he called the old ways of knowing. One entry caught my attention. "The corn remembers what we forget. Plant with intention and the earth will speak back." At the time, I thought it was just the poetic musings of an old farmer, but I would later understand the profound truth in those words. As dawn broke over the fields, I loaded the antique planter with Grandpa's seeds, feeling like I was about to embark on something much bigger than farming. The morning air was crisp and full of possibility, and for the first time since his death, I felt truly connected to his spirit. The morning I began planting Grandpa's corn, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. There was something almost ceremonial about opening each packet of seeds, feeling their weight and texture, knowing they carried generations of genetic memory within their husks. I started with the Cherokee White Eagle variety in the north field, following the planting pattern Grandpa had sketched in his journal. Instead of the straight, uniform rows that modern agriculture demanded, his diagram showed gentle curves that followed the natural contours of the land. My neighbor, Bill Henderson, stopped by around noon, leaning against his truck as he watched me work. "You know those old varieties are going to be nothing but trouble," he called out. "Inconsistent germination, poor disease resistance, and don't even get me started on the yields." I paused in my work, wiping sweat from my forehead. Maybe so, but they survived for centuries without chemicals or genetic modification. That's got to count for something. Bill shrugged and drove off, probably thinking I'd lost my mind along with my grandfather. But as I continued planting, following the curved patterns Grandpa had designed, something felt profoundly right about the process. Each variety went into its designated section: the painted mountain corn in the eastern field, the glass gem variety along the southern border, and several others in smaller plots scattered across the 20 acres. The pattern seemed random at first, but Grandpa's journal insisted there was logic to the placement. By evening, my back ached and my hands were stained with soil, but I felt a satisfaction I'd never experienced with conventional planting. Sarah brought me a cold beer and stood beside me, surveying our work. "Think your grandfather would be proud?" she asked. I nodded, watching the last rays of sunlight stretch across the freshly planted fields. "I think he's been waiting for this moment longer than we know." The weeks following planting were filled with the usual spring anxieties that every farmer knows. Would there be enough rain? Too much rain? Would the seeds germinate properly? But with Grandpa's heirloom varieties, I carried an additional weight of uncertainty. Modern hybrid seeds come with guarantees and predictable timelines. Grandpa's seeds operated on their own mysterious schedule. Some varieties sprouted within days, while others seemed to slumber in the soil for weeks, making me wonder if they were viable at all. I found myself walking the fields every morning and evening, checking for signs of life. Sarah teased me about being an overprotective parent, but I couldn't help myself. These weren't just crops. They were living links to my family's history. The conventional corn in the other fields emerged in neat, uniform rows exactly when the seed company predicted. But Grandpa's varieties appeared sporadically, in patterns that seemed almost random. Some areas showed thick stands of healthy seedlings, while others remained bare for so long I considered replanting. During this waiting period, I spent hours reading through Grandpa's journal, trying to understand his methods. His notes were filled with references to moon phases, soil temperature, and something he called earth rhythms. Much of it sounded like folklore to my modern ears, but I was beginning to suspect there was wisdom hidden in what others might dismiss as superstition. One entry particularly intrigued me. "The old corn knows when to wake up. Trust the pattern, even when it makes no sense." I had no idea what pattern he meant, but I decided to trust his advice and resist the urge to replant the slow-germinating areas. By late May, most of Grandpa's corn had finally emerged, creating a patchwork of different heights, colors, and growth patterns across the 20 acres. It looked chaotic compared to the military precision of my conventional fields, but there was something beautiful about the diversity. As summer progressed, the differences between my conventional corn and Grandpa's varieties became increasingly apparent. The hybrid corn grew in perfect formation, tall, uniform stalks reaching skyward with mathematical precision. But Grandpa's heirloom varieties seemed to follow their own rules entirely. The Cherokee White Eagle corn grew shorter but stockier, with leaves that seemed to shimmer silver in the morning light. The Painted Mountain variety displayed an incredible range of colors, even in its vegetative stage, with some stalks showing purple streaks along their stems. The glass gem corn remained the most mysterious, looking ordinary until you caught it in just the right light, when it seemed to glow with an inner radiance. What worried me most was the apparent randomness of the growth patterns. While some areas showed vigorous, healthy plants, others seemed stunted or sparse. From ground level, it looked like a failed experiment, exactly what my neighbors had predicted. Bill Henderson made sure to comment every time he drove past. "Told you those old varieties were trouble," he'd call out from his truck window. "Still time to spray some herbicide and replant with something decent." Even Sarah began expressing concerns. "Maybe we should consider Bill's advice," she suggested one evening as we walked through the fields. "We can't afford to lose 20 acres of production." I understood her worry, but something in Grandpa's journal kept me committed to seeing the experiment through. He'd written extensively about patience, about trusting processes that couldn't be rushed or forced. "Modern farming wants everything fast and predictable," one entry read. "But the earth operates on deeper rhythms. Sometimes what looks like failure is just preparation for something greater." Still, as July heat settled over the farm and my conventional corn began showing tassels while Grandpa's varieties lagged behind, I began to question my decision. Had I let sentiment override good judgment? Was I risking our family's financial security for the sake of honoring a dead man's memory? It was during the first week of August that I finally understood what Grandpa had been trying to tell me. I'd climbed the old water tower that stood at the highest point of our property, ostensibly to check for storm damage after a particularly violent thunderstorm the night before. From that elevated vantage point, looking down across the 20 acres of heirloom corn, I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. What had appeared chaotic and random from ground level suddenly revealed itself as an intricate, deliberate pattern. The different varieties, with their varying heights, colors, and growth patterns, formed a massive design visible only from above. The Cherokee White Eagle corn created flowing lines that curved across the landscape like a river. The Painted Mountain variety added splashes of color that looked like scattered wildflowers. The Glass Gem corn formed precise geometric shapes that seemed to anchor the entire composition. But it was more than just a pretty pattern. As I studied it more carefully, I realized the design contained symbols, Native American pictographs that I recognized from books about local history. There was a corn plant, obviously, but also symbols for water, sun, earth, and what appeared to be a family tree with multiple branches. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and took dozens of photos from different angles. How had Grandpa planned this? His journal contained planting diagrams, but they'd seemed like simple field layouts, not blueprints for an aerial masterpiece. I climbed down from the tower and ran to the house, calling for Sarah. When I showed her the photos, her eyes widened in amazement. "This is incredible," she whispered. "But how did he know exactly where to plant each variety to create this pattern?" That evening, I spread Grandpa's journal across the kitchen table and studied his diagrams with new eyes. What I'd mistaken for random planting notes were actually precise coordinates, carefully calculated to create this hidden message that could only be seen from above. The old man had left me something far more valuable than seeds. He'd left me a masterpiece. Determined to understand the full meaning of Grandpa's aerial artwork, I contacted Dr. Maria Santos, a professor of Native American Studies at the State University. When I showed her the photos, her reaction was immediate and intense. "This is extraordinary," she said, studying the images with a magnifying glass. "These symbols are from the Cherokee tradition, but they're arranged in a pattern I've never seen before. It's like a story written in corn." Over the following days, Dr. Santos helped me decode the pictographs. The central symbol represented the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, the foundation of Native American agriculture. Surrounding it were symbols for the four directions, the cycle of seasons, and what appeared to be a genealogy chart. But the most intriguing element was a series of small symbols that Dr. Santos identified as a form of Cherokee syllabary, an actual written message embedded within the larger design. "Your grandfather was remarkably knowledgeable about Cherokee culture," she observed. "This level of detail suggests years of study and preparation." As we worked to translate the syllabary, a story began to emerge. It spoke of land that had been sacred to the Cherokee people before European settlement, of corn varieties that had been grown here for centuries, and of a responsibility to preserve both the seeds and the knowledge they represented. The final portion of the message was personal, clearly intended for me. "The corn remembers what we forget. You are the keeper now. Plant with honor, harvest with gratitude, and pass the knowledge forward." I felt a chill run down my spine as Dr. Santos read those words aloud. Grandpa had somehow known that I would be the one to plant his seeds, the one to discover his message. But how could he have been so certain? That night, I called my grandmother, who was living in a nursing home in town. When I described what we'd found, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "Your grandfather spent 40 years researching the history of our land. He knew things about this place that would surprise you." My visit to Grandma Rose the next day revealed family secrets that had been carefully guarded for decades. Sitting in her small room at Sunset Manor, surrounded by photos and memories, she finally told me the truth about our family's connection to the land. "Your great-great-grandfather didn't just buy this farm," she began, her voice soft but clear. "He married into it. His wife, your great-great-grandmother Mary, was half Cherokee. Her family had been farming that land for generations before the government forced most of the tribe to relocate." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd grown up thinking we were just another family of European immigrants who'd worked hard to build a successful farm. I'd never known about our Native American heritage. "Mary's family hid their identity to keep the land," Grandma continued. "It was dangerous to be Cherokee in those days. But they never stopped growing the traditional corn varieties, never stopped following the old ways. They just did it quietly, passing the knowledge down through the women of the family." She pulled out a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside were more seeds, even older than the ones Grandpa had left me, along with photographs of Native American family members I'd never known existed. There was also a letter, written in Mary's careful handwriting, explaining the sacred nature of the corn varieties and the responsibility that came with growing them. "Your grandfather spent years learning about Mary's heritage," Grandma explained. "He felt guilty that the knowledge had been lost, that we'd abandoned our connection to the land's true history. Creating that pattern in the corn was his way of honoring Mary's memory and ensuring the truth wouldn't die with him." As I held the old photographs, studying faces that shared my own features, I understood why Grandpa had been so confident I would plant his seeds. It wasn't just sentiment, it was destiny. The land had been calling me home to reclaim a heritage I'd never known I possessed. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a familiar coat. September brought the harvest season, and with it came a transformation I hadn't expected. Word about the aerial corn pattern had spread through the agricultural community, drawing visitors from across the state. What had started as a private family discovery was becoming something much larger. Dr. Santos brought colleagues from the university, photographers documented the pattern from helicopters, and local news stations ran features about the mystery corn farmer who'd created art with agriculture. But for me, the real magic happened during the actual harvest. Each variety of corn revealed its own unique characteristics as we gathered it. The Cherokee White Eagle produced large white kernels perfect for grinding into meal. The Painted Mountain corn showed an incredible range of colors: deep purples, bright reds, golden yellows, and pure whites, often all on the same ear. The Glass Gem variety lived up to its name, producing kernels that looked like precious stones when dried. But it was more than just the visual beauty that amazed me. These ancient varieties had flavors and textures I'd never experienced with modern hybrid corn. The Cherokee White Eagle made the most incredible cornbread, with a nutty sweetness that reminded me of childhood visits to Grandpa's kitchen. The Painted Mountain variety was perfect for parching, creating a snack that was both nutritious and delicious. As I worked through the harvest, following the same patterns Grandpa had used for decades, I felt connected to something much larger than myself. Each kernel represented thousands of years of careful selection and preservation by indigenous farmers who understood that corn was more than just a crop. It was a sacred trust. Sarah helped with the harvest, and I could see her growing appreciation for what we'd accomplished. "I was wrong to doubt this," she admitted one evening as we shucked corn on the porch. "This isn't just farming. its cultural preservation. The conventional corn in our other fields yielded exactly what the seed company had promised, but it felt hollow compared to the richness of Grandpa's heritage varieties. The attention our corn pattern had attracted brought some unexpected visitors to the farm. In late September, just as we were finishing the harvest, a group of Cherokee elders made the journey from Oklahoma to see what we'd created. Their leader, an elderly man named Thomas Crow Feather, studied the harvested corn with tears in his eyes. These varieties were thought to be lost, he said, holding kernels of the Cherokee White Eagle corn in his weathered palm. My grandmother grew corn like this before the removal. We've been searching for these genetics for decades. The elders explained that many traditional corn varieties had been lost during the forced relocations of the 1830s. Families had tried to carry seeds with them on the Trail of Tears, but the harsh conditions and government restrictions had made it nearly impossible to preserve their agricultural heritage. Your great-great-grandmother Mary must have been very brave to keep these varieties alive, Thomas observed, and very wise to hide their true significance until the time was right for them to be revealed again. The visit became an impromptu ceremony as the elders blessed the land and offered prayers of gratitude for the preservation of their ancestral corn. They taught me traditional songs about planting and harvest, shared stories about the spiritual significance of corn in Cherokee culture, and formally welcomed me into a community I'd never known I belonged to. Before they left, Thomas made a request that would change the direction of my farming forever. Would you be willing to share these seeds with other Cherokee communities? We want to bring these varieties home, to plant them on our own land again. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Of course, I replied. That's what Grandpa would have wanted. Thomas smiled and placed his hand on my shoulder. You understand now? You're not just a farmer. You're a seed keeper. This is sacred work. As I watched their vehicles disappear down our gravel road, I felt the full weight of my inheritance settling around me like a mantle of responsibility and honor. The months following the Cherokee elders' visit brought changes I never could have anticipated. Word about our heritage corn varieties spread through Native American communities across the country, and requests for seeds began arriving from tribal agricultural programs, universities, and individual families seeking to reconnect with their ancestral foods. I established what I called the Mary's Legacy Seed Project, named after my great-great-grandmother, to coordinate the distribution of these precious genetics. Sarah took charge of the administrative side, creating a network of seed keepers who would grow out the varieties and share them further. The project grew beyond my wildest expectations. We connected with Hopi farmers in Arizona who were preserving their own ancient corn varieties, Haudenosaunee growers in New York, maintaining traditional Three Sisters gardens, and Pueblo communities in New Mexico who had never stopped growing heritage corn despite centuries of pressure to modernize. Each connection taught me something new about the deep relationship between indigenous peoples and corn. I learned that corn wasn't just food, it was medicine, ceremony, identity, and survival, all wrapped into one sacred plant. The varieties Grandpa had preserved weren't just genetic resources. They were living libraries of cultural knowledge. Dr. Santos helped me understand that what we were doing had implications far beyond agriculture. You're participating in cultural restoration, she explained during one of her visits. These seeds carry not just genetic diversity, but cultural memory. Every time someone plants them, they're reconnecting with ancestral knowledge. The conventional farming community had mixed reactions to our project. Some neighbors remained skeptical, viewing it as impractical romanticism, but others began asking questions about heritage varieties and sustainable farming practices. Bill Henderson even stopped by to ask if I had any regular heirloom corn he could try on a small plot. By the end of our first year, we'd distributed seeds to over 50 communities across North America. Each packet went out with detailed growing instructions, cultural information, and a request to share the harvest with others. The corn was coming home. As I write this, It's been 3 years since I first planted Grandpa's seeds, and the transformation has been complete. Our farm has become a center for heritage seed preservation, hosting workshops, field days, and cultural exchanges that bring together farmers, researchers, and indigenous communities from across the continent. The aerial corn pattern has become an annual tradition. Each year, I design a new pictograph message using different heritage varieties, creating living art that celebrates the connection between land, culture, and agriculture. Visitors come from around the world to see the patterns and learn about indigenous farming practices. But the most meaningful change has been personal. I've discovered an identity I never knew I possessed, connecting with Cherokee relatives I never knew existed, and learning traditional practices that have enriched every aspect of my farming. The land feels different now, not just property to be managed, but a sacred trust to be honored. Sarah and I have taught our children about their Cherokee heritage, and they've embraced it with enthusiasm. Our daughter Emma, now 8, can identify different corn varieties by their leaves alone, and our son Jake has learned to grind cornmeal using traditional methods. They understand that they're part of something much larger than our small farm. The Mary's Legacy Seed Project now maintains over 30 heritage corn varieties and has distributed seeds to more than 200 communities. We've established partnerships with tribal colleges, heritage seed organizations, and indigenous food sovereignty movements across North America. Sometimes I stand in the same spot where I first saw Grandpa's pattern revealed in the corn, and I think about the chain of events that brought me here. A grieving grandson's sentimental decision to plant old seeds led to the discovery of a family secret, which led to the restoration of lost agricultural heritage, which led to connections with communities I never knew existed. Grandpa was right. The corn remembered what we had forgotten. And now, thanks to his patience and wisdom, that memory is spreading like seeds on the wind, taking root in new soil, growing into something beautiful and lasting. Thank you for listening to this story of discovery, heritage, and the power of following your heart even when others call you foolish. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please tell me what part of the world you're listening from, and if you have any family farming stories of your own to share. And if this story touched you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more tales of agriculture, heritage, and the surprising connections that bind us all together. The seeds are still growing and the story continues.